Thank you for joining me today. Today I want to talk about when will Yeshua Messiah, Jesus Christ, return. I'm going to start by covering some information I talked about in another video I produced called False Rapture Happened in Scripture. I will try to put a link to that over on the side. But then I'm going to follow up with a new prophecy that I believe Yeshua showed me in His Word fairly recently. So I'm going to just start with the verses regarding the first prophecy that He showed me a few years back. Psalm 94. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. 2 Peter 3:8. But do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like 1 day. Now here's the prophecy that He had shown me, and I'm sure you, if you read Hosea. I will go away and return to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. In their affliction they will earnestly seek me. Now here we see them responding to Messiah. Come, let us return to Yahweh, for He has torn us, but He will heal us. He has wounded us, but He will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days. He will raise us up on the 3rd day, that we may live before Him. So when did Messiah go away and return to His place? The answer, the ascension. How long will Messiah be gone? Well, He said in Hosea, until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. We also read in Hosea, He will revive us after 2 days, and He will raise us up on the 3rd day, that we may live before Him. So He's going to revive His people after 2 days, and we know that that the people, the blood descendants of Israel, turned to Him when they see Him, and He will raise us up or resurrect us on the 3rd day. Now going back to what we just read in Psalms, for 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has gone by, or like a watch in the night. And I can't help but think about Luke 12, and this is also written in Matthew, where we read, and if he shall come in the 2nd watch, or in the 3rd watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. Isn't that amazing? Here we see the word watch. He's talking about coming in the 2nd or 3rd watch, and His servants looking for Him at that time. And we read in 2 Peter 3:8, but do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like 1 day. So when we go back to the Hosea prophecy and we read it this way, this is Messiah talking, I will go away and return to my place, until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. In their affliction they will earnestly seek me. Come, let us return to Yahweh, for He has torn us, but He will heal us. He has wounded us, but He will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days, or after 2,000 years. He will raise us up on the 3rd day, meaning on the 1,000th year, that we may live before Him. Now, His ascension, or when He returned to where He came from, was approximately in 29 AD, sometime between 29 and 33 AD. Some people say 32. 2,000 years, or 2 days later, would be 2029 to 2033 AD, approximately. The 3,000th year, or the 3rd day, would be essentially any time after 2029 to 2033 AD, sometime after that. Now, this is what I believe Yeshua has shown me recently. When we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, quote, now these things happened to them, meaning Israel, as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. We know this is even more true now than it was at the time this letter was written by Paul to the early church. Taking this to heart, we go to Numbers 14, and we read Yahweh speaking. He says, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. We also read, and Yahweh's anger was kindled against Israel, and He made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in His sight, in the sight of Yahweh, was consumed. So how long did the children of Israel wander in the desert after the Exodus? And when I say Exodus, I'm talking about after the Passover lamb was slain. They wandered for 40 years. Now, are there other kinds of years in the Bible? Well, yes, there are Jubilee years. A Jubilee year is 50 solar years. And when I say solar years, I'm talking about from harvest to harvest or Passover to Passover. They're years the way you and I think of them. Here's the definition in Leviticus of a Jubilee year. We read, "You are also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years. You shall have the 50th year as a Jubilee." Now, while the children of Israel did wander in the wilderness for 40 literal solar years, or the way you and I would think of years, prophetically, they are an example to us. Remember what Paul said earlier. He said, "Now these things happened to them, Israel, as an example, and they are written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come." So from the time of the Exodus, meaning after the Passover lamb was slain, the children of Israel wandered 40 years in the wilderness before entering the promised land. So the example that Israel gave us was from the Exodus, meaning after the Passover lamb was slain, until they entered into the promised land, 40 years passed. 40 regular solar years passed. Now prophetically, this is what I'm seeing. The Exodus Passover lamb, Yeshua, was slain. And from the time that he was slain until the time that we will enter into the promised land, 40 Jubilee years will pass. Now remember, a Jubilee year is 50 solar years, 50 regular years, 50 Passovers. So if we take the 40 years of wandering and we multiply that times 50 years, we get 2,000 years. So this is what I'm saying. From the time Yeshua Messiah, our Passover lamb, was slain until we enter the promised land, 40 Jubilee years of wandering, i.e. 2,000 years, should pass. So our Passover lamb, Yeshua, was slain in approximately 29 to 33 AD. So 40 Jubilee years later, after wandering, would be 2029 to 2033 AD. So how does this line up with Hosea's prophecy? Remember, Hosea said he will revive us after 2 days or after 2,000 years, and he will raise us up, meaning resurrect us on the 3rd day or on the 3,000th year, that we may live before him. Well, as you can see, they line up. These two prophecies, the Hosea prophecy about the resurrection and also the wandering for 40 years of Israel between the Exodus and the entering into the promised land. And remember, the Exodus is, when I'm saying Exodus, I'm talking about right after the Passover lamb was slain. Okay, now all this is wonderful and good, but we also have to look at what Yeshua told us plainly. And when the disciples asked him, they said, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus answered and said to them, "See to it that no one misleads you." And this is in Matthew 24. And he began giving them signs, and some of the signs he started with, or he said there will be wars and rumors of wars, but he said the end's not yet. Like, that's not it. That's not a sign, a final sign. But then he went on and he got more and more specific, and he began to give specific signs. And I'm just going to touch on 2 of the signs that Yeshua, our Messiah, gave, so that we can know that we really are at the very end. And the first one is, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come." So did the disciples think that an imminent coming was what they were to expect? No, they knew that the gospel of the kingdom had to be preached into the entire world, the whole world, before the end would come. And they knew that hadn't happened yet. They knew how close they were and how close they weren't. A second sign was, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand." Now, we know from Daniel that the abomination of desolation occurs 3.5 years into, and from the Revelation, the abomination of desolation occurs 3.5 years into the last 7 years. Yeshua is very clear. He said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken about through Daniel, let the reader understand. We also know that there will be people reading his words written down, and that when they see, or when we see the abomination of desolation,